Speech 251, I really gained a lot of information information to improve my public speaking. Before I was in this class, my public speaking skills were to be improved on, and definitely did not really know the basics of formulating a speech or really delivering that speech so it has a stronger effect on the audience. I was super shy and I didn't really know anything, and the skills I was expecting to gain from this class was how to properly formulate a speech, like organizationally wise. I believe my strongest presentation was the informative speech, and I feel like it was my strongest speech because of my background knowledge on the topic. So I felt more fluent when I was teaching my classmates on massive hemorrhaging. One classmate speech that I felt was super strong was Ira Jane Deloso's persuasive speech. I say this because I felt like she was truly passionate about the topic of mental health, and she chose the topic well because she related to her audience and provided a small gradual change that we can do to improve our mental health. In doing so, her persuasive speech was something that we could all use to benefit ourselves, especially in the day and age that we live in today, where mental health has really been on top of some people's priority list. And that's really awesome because before it used to be suppressed and taboo to talk about, but I'm glad that people are more comfortable to talk about it and finally seeking help and finally seeking ways to actually improve themselves. The organizational pattern that I used to organize my story speech was utilizing the time sequence pattern. Time sequence pattern states the order of events as they occur, and I use that to tell a story on how I became my own person, starting from scared little Megan back in high school to the present Megan now that chooses her own path that is current day. The method of informing that I used for my informative speech was to explain as well as demonstrate. Explaining, according to Nelson, is to reveal how something works or why something occurred or how something should be evaluated. And I explained how bleeding worked in my informative speech, as well as explaining how I would fix the massive hemorrhaging. For demonstration wise, I demonstrated how I would use bleeding adjuncts such as the tourniquet, how to apply it, the basics of it, as well as the combat gauze that I also showed in my persuasive speech. In my informative speech. For my persuasive speech, I utilized Monroe's motivated sequence pattern to share the importance of reducing their plastic footprint. To start off, I shared pictures of sea creatures that are affected by plastic and to utilize the ethos element of persuasion to appeal to the audience emotions and actually catch the audience's attention so they would listen. With the pictures, I explained the need for my proposal, which was to decrease their plastic output. And in the speech, I told my audience that my proposal would achieve satisfaction because it would be helping the environment as well as their own health by doing that. Towards the end, I made the audience visualize a world where we wouldn't have to depend on single-use plastics that can help the environment and our health again. And it's really important because showing the big picture to the audience, they'll put things into perspective and consider the proposal that we're actually sharing. And eventually, I requested the audience to make small actions that could work towards minimal plastic usage, such as recycling, bringing their own forks to take out, or bringing their own reusable totes to grocery stores instead of using those plastic ones and increasing their plastic output. Some other techniques that I use to persuade the audience for action is benefits to persuade, because showing them that they can gain something from it, especially if it has to do with their health, they would more likely listen and possibly take my proposal into further consideration. I also use small gradual changes because, according to Nelson, making the audience change small things in their life would be more effective than asking them to change their entire routine or their thought process. Some additional techniques that I used from the book was topic selection, because in the book it mentioned that I would have to use a topic that the audience can relate to and how it can affect them, as well as choosing something I felt more comfortable talking about. Because I used this technique, I was able to create and share a speech that I felt confident about, and it showed when I was sharing my speech with you all because I knew what I was talking about, I knew what I wanted to say, but sometimes throughout the speech, there was times where I had to refer to my outline. I feel like my skills have definitely improved over the course of the semester because I was able to utilize the types of organizational patterns that was provided in the books. One such as time sequence that I use for my story speech to highlight the events that happened throughout time. I use problem solution for my persuasive speech to show the problem of plastics in the ocean and the solution to minimize our plastic waste, as well as topical sequence for my informative speech, where I divided up my main points into related parts. My instructors said that my strength in my speeches were my eye contact, as well as my introduction and conclusion methods. For example, I used a story in my informative speech for my introduction, which I really wanted to really appeal to the audience because sometimes things do happen and you need to be there to help. And in my persuasive speech, I used a powerful quote in my conclusion to make my proposal really stick, and so they can actually think about it after the speech if they listened. In my speeches, they all had different type of feedback because whenever Professor Dawn would provide constructive feedback in the forums, I would try to improve on things that I lacked. For example, in the story speech, she mentioned that I should try to project my voice to the audience or adjust my pitch so I can make it loud enough, like how Nelson spoke briefly in the textbook. By definition, pitch is the highness or lowness of a speaker's voice. It's upward and downward inflection, the melody produced by the voice. I adjusted the highness of my voice to make my voice project louder to the audience because my normal voice is lower and quieter. And that wouldn't really help with my delivery to my audience. Something I could have definitely improved on was my extemporaneous speaking. And by definition, it meant conversational speaking with minimal usage of notes. In most of my speeches, there were times where I would have to refer to my keyword outline a lot to remember the track of my speech, which most likely affected the delivery because I had to pause and I had to see where I was in the outline. And I feel like it did affect the delivery in some sort of way. Some professional goals that I have for the future is to become a flight paramedic and further my education in pre-hospital medicine. An example of a time where I think I would have to do an individual presentation is when I'm teaching my soldiers and using the skills that I have learned in this class to help aid with that. And that would be like giving them an informative speech on a medical topic, which goes into the next question, which I learned how to be a better instructor. Learning in this class helped me be a better instructor because I learned helpful tips that I learned for informative speeches, such as different types of informing that can have different effects on the audience. I can use this information to help improve my public speaking opportunities in the future because in a case where I do have to teach a public, let's say, speech or speak in an event or anything, I would know what to do. I would know how to outline it. I would know how to deliver it, how to properly deliver it, and really make my point last in the audience and teach them if I am teaching an informative speech. Thank you all for being with me alongside this class. I hope everyone had a great semester, and I look forward to learning with you all in the future if we ever cross paths again. Thank you so much.